We all agreed, it's best if you don't come to Ethan's wedding. That's what my son said. No hesitation, no stammer, just cold as linoleum in winter. I was standing right beside the dining room table, where I'd just finished wrapping the quilt I'd sewn for Ethan and his fiancée, now wife apparently. Cream cotton, hand-stitched, with a patch of my old nursing uniform sewn in the corner. A quiet nod to all the nights I'd sat by Ethan's hospital bed when his asthma had him wheezing like a rusted accordion. I didn't ask who we all was, I already knew. Lisa's voice was probably right there beside him, coaching him through the call, like she always had. And Ethan? My sweet boy who used to beg me for stories at bedtime, he'd nodded along, I suppose. Couldn't risk having the old woman ruin their curated aesthetic. I didn't cry, not then. I just looked down at the wedding gift, neat and square, with that silver ribbon Ethan used to wrap around his toys like a lasso. It shimmered under the kitchen light, mocking me. "Well," I said, barely above a whisper, "that's a shame." I hung up, stood there for a long moment, the phone still warm in my hand. I could feel my pulse thudding through my fingertips. Not anger, not yet, just a buzzing silence, like a room after someone slams the door. My eyes drifted to the dress, hanging on the back of the hallway door. Pale lavender, knee-length. I'd picked it special, soft fabric that wouldn't show my age spots, sleeves just long enough to cover the worst of the bruising from blood thinners. I'd even bought new shoes, kitten heels in dove gray. I'd wanted to feel pretty, not young, not thin, just seen. But I was invisible. They'd made that clear. I took the quilt and laid it gently on the chair in the living room. My hands moved automatically, folded it again, smoothed the corners. My fingers paused on the edge of one panel, the one made from Ethan's old swim team shirt. That chlorine-stiffened cotton had been hard to work with, but I'd insisted. I remembered the nights I sat in the bleachers with a thermos of cocoa and sore knees. Every meet, every medal. I never missed one. I sank into the recliner, slow and stiff, that buzzing silence still crawling up my spine. The clock on the mantel ticked loud and steady. Tick, tick, tick. What had I done? What sin had I committed so large, so unforgivable, that they'd rather I miss my only grandson's wedding? Did I speak too slowly for Lisa's taste? Did I smell too much like lavender salve and Vicks? Had I held Ethan's hand too long when he came by after his car accident? I'd asked Lisa once, back when she still smiled at me, "Do you think I'm overbearing?" She'd laughed, thin and flat. "No, Evelyn, just traditional." And there it was. The indictment. I was too much and not enough all at once. The sound of mail sliding through the front door startled me. I got up, my joints cracking like old wood, and shuffled to the hall. A single envelope, thick and white, lay waiting. The invitation. I opened it with trembling fingers. Lisa had printed it on pearl-embossed cardstock, her name above Ethan's, like a crown. My name was not on the guest list, not even in the corner, not even as a courtesy. That night, I didn't sleep. Not really. I lay in bed beneath my chamomile-scented sheets, my eyes open, the ceiling fan whirring like some distant warning bell. I could still feel the wedding quilt folded over the arm of the chair, like it was waiting to be useful, to be loved, like me. I'd sewn it for months, every stitch a memory. Ethan's toddler drawings printed on fabric, scraps from the summer he built a treehouse with James, even a square from the old flannel blanket we used when he had asthma spells as a boy. He used to say, "Gran, you make things better." I guess I don't anymore. By dawn, my eyes were dry, but my mouth tasted of metal. That's how grief shows up in the body sometimes. Not always with tears. Sometimes it curls up behind your ribs like a fist. I sat in my kitchen, wrapped in my shawl, cradling a mug of peppermint tea. It was still too warm for sweaters, but I needed something to hold on to. The quiet in that house wasn't peace, it was punishment. I don't know what made me get up and reach for the box in the hall closet. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was pain looking for a place to go. Inside were Ethan's old letters, the ones he'd written me from summer camp, from college. I'd kept every single one, rubber-banded, sorted by year, dated in my tiny handwriting. "Dear Gran, thanks for the cookies. Dad never sends stuff like that. Gran, I can't sleep. Lisa's mad again. I miss how things felt at your house. Gran, don't tell Dad, but I think you're the only person who really sees me." I ran my fingers over those words like braille, each sentence a small bruise reopening. I'd been there for every breath of that boy's life, every asthma attack, every heartbreak, every whispered confession about being scared of not living up to his father's shadow. And now I was too embarrassing to be seen beside him? The kettle clicked off, startling me. I poured another cup of tea, this time with honey. It coated my tongue but couldn't touch the bitter weight inside. I walked to the mantel and lifted the wedding invitation again. It still shimmered, all form and polish. Lisa's name first. Mine nowhere. Like I'd been scraped off the family tree. I'd kept quiet so many times for the sake of peace. I let them cancel Christmas dinners and call it tight scheduling. I let Lisa roll her eyes at my Tupperware and say she preferred glass only. I swallowed it when Mark forgot my birthday twice in a row, but posted tributes to his father-in-law. I even bit my tongue when Lisa said I was lucky to live in such an outdated house without a mortgage. But this cut wasn't silent. This had teeth. I stared down at the invitation, then at the quilt. My breath caught. My hands curled into fists on the table, the skin paper-thin, but still strong, when I needed them to be. I won't be erased quietly. I said it out loud. My voice didn't shake. After I calmed, I walked slowly to the oak secretary desk in the corner of the living room. I hadn't opened that drawer in years. Inside was James's ledger. Black leather, cracked along the spine, smelled like time itself, dust and tobacco and ink. He'd kept every number, every dime spent and saved. James was a man of simple truths: God, family, honesty, and the dignity of clean math. It was his way of loving us. Tucked inside the back cover was the trust paper. I'd nearly forgotten. When James died, we set up a trust for Ethan. Nothing flashy, just something solid. A cushion for when he got married. But here was the thing. I was the sole trustee. James had insisted. "You'll know when he's ready," he'd said. "And if not, you'll protect him from what he doesn't see yet." They don't know I still have control. They think I'm just the woman who folds napkins and stays quiet in family group chats. I ran my fingers over the thick linen paper. There was a line, subtle but clear, about distribution upon discretion of trustee at time of legal union. That was me. I had the say-so. They had no idea. I set the folder down gently and let myself exhale. The house creaked in the cooling dusk. The grandfather clock ticked behind me. Tick, tick, tick. Time didn't stop for anyone. But now I had something they didn't. Leverage. I hadn't touched the trust papers since James died. I remember the day we sat with the lawyer. Ethan had just turned 10. Mark had that restless leg going, bouncing his knee like a jackhammer under the table. Lisa wasn't there. Too busy, she'd said. James had looked at me, his hand on mine, firm as stone. If I'm not here, Evie will know what to do. She's the steady one. I hadn't felt steady in a long time. But holding that old folder, thick linen, notarized stamps, it came back to me. That same grit I had after the hospital shifts, when I'd strip off my scrubs, sink into the kitchen chair, and figure out how to pay bills with barely enough to cover the basics. I hadn't felt power in years. But now, it pulsed like electricity under my skin. They didn't know. Not Lisa with her staged smiles and white wine judgment. Not Mark, who hadn't asked me how I was since Christmas. And not Ethan, God bless him, who probably thought trust funds came with cake and candles. They had no idea that every dollar sat under my thumb, and that thumb was tired of being walked on. I didn't rush. No, darling. That would have made it about anger. And I wasn't angry. Not in that moment. I was clear. I opened the hallway cabinet and pulled out James's file boxes. I'd labeled them myself, of course. House, medical, Ethan college, and trust. Still in my handwriting, neat and blue, the way I used to label Ethan's lunchboxes. Always blue, his favorite. I sat down at the kitchen table and began to read. The trust wasn't just generous, it was foundational, enough to cover a down payment, or student loans, or help raise a child. But the release was discretionary. My discretion. James had written a clause in there, plain as day. Funds are to be dispersed solely at the trustee's judgment upon the establishment of a stable and supportive partnership, recognized legally, and witnessed with inclusion of the surviving trustee. Meaning, if I wasn't there, the money stayed put. I traced that line with my finger, slow and deliberate. Felt like finding a hidden escape hatch in a burning building. I looked around my kitchen. That little window with the view of Carla's dogwood tree. My chipped sugar jar. The linen curtains I made from Ruth's old tablecloths. All these little things I'd held onto while they quietly planned around my disappearance. Not anymore. By the next morning, I was dressed in slacks and my pinstripe blouse, the one Ruth always said made me look like I'd come from a board meeting with God. I pulled my hair into a soft knot, dabbed on lipstick, and stepped into the May sunshine. Carla's law office was 2 blocks over, in that old converted Craftsman with creaky floors and the scent of eucalyptus oil and printer ink. I'd helped her organize a garage sale there once, back when her mother died. She stood when I walked in. "Evelyn," she said, her eyes squinting. "You all right?" "I need to talk about the trust," I said, quietly. Carla didn't ask questions, just shut the door and pulled out a legal pad. I handed her the file. She looked it over, humming that little tune she does when she's thinking. Like a church organ warming up. She muttered. "You still have full authority." "I want to add a clause," I said. My voice didn't shake. She looked up. "Go on?" I folded my hands in my lap, my thumb brushing the base of my wedding ring. A reflex from the years when James was my steady place in the storm. "I want it in writing. No disbursement unless I am formally invited to the wedding and present. Not notified, not mentioned, present." Carla blinked. "You sure about that?" I didn't answer. I just held her gaze. She gave a small nod. "All right then." It was only 3 days later when Mark left the voicemail. Stilted. Cautious. The kind of voice he used when trying to sound casual during bad news. "Hey, Mom? Just wondering, did you maybe talk to someone? About the trust? Ethan's accountant saw something about updated terms. It's probably nothing, but yeah. Give me a call?" I didn't. I made myself a grilled cheese. Cut it diagonally, like I always had for Ethan when he was small. I sprinkled sea salt on the tomato slices and sat in the quiet of my kitchen. The voicemail still playing in my head. They knew something had shifted. Maybe not everything, but enough. And I felt steady again. For the first time in years, I wasn't hoping to be seen. I wasn't chasing an invitation. I wasn't offering explanations or compromises or casseroles. I had drawn a line, not in anger, in dignity. The paperwork was signed on a Thursday. Bright morning light poured through Carla's office window, catching on the brass lamp she never dusted. She slid the new trust documents across her desk and gave me a look. Not judgment, not pity, just curiosity. "You want to include anything else?" she asked. I looked down at the clause we'd added. Firm, final. Funds to be released only upon verified presence of the trustee at the marital ceremony. "No," I said. "That covers it." She tapped her pen against her teeth, then set it down. "They're going to find out," I nodded. "They might push back." "I expect they will." Carla leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "And you're okay with that?" I smiled, just a little. "Sweetheart, I've delivered breech twins in an elevator during a blackout. I can handle a voicemail from my son." That made her laugh. A low, surprised chuckle. "Fair enough." I signed my name with the same pen James used when we bought this house. Blue ink. Steady hand. Carla notarized it, stamped it, and the air in the room shifted. It was done. I didn't feel triumphant. This wasn't about revenge. It was about gravity. Letting things settle where they belong. On the way home, I stopped at the florist. Not because I needed flowers, but because it's what I used to do when Ethan was sick, bring brightness into a heavy space. I chose yellow lilies and white freesia. The clerk asked if it was a special occasion. "No," I said. "It's just time." She looked puzzled. I didn't explain. When I got home, I placed the flowers in the cut glass vase James's mother gave us on our first anniversary. The water shimmered under the kitchen light. Then I saw it. The answering machine blinking red. One message. I pressed the button, expecting Mark's voice again. But it wasn't Mark. It was Lisa. "Hi, Evelyn." Silence. Then, well, we heard you might have made changes. To things. I mean, it's your choice, of course. But we thought maybe you misunderstood the situation. Anyway, just call back when you can. We'd like to talk. Her voice was off, less polished, like someone trying to sound friendly while bracing for a slap. I didn't call back. Instead, I picked up the invitation from where I'd left it beside the untouched quilt. The RSVP card was still tucked inside, blank. Declines with regret. I wrote it in my smallest cursive, not out of spite, but clarity. Then I folded it up, placed it back inside the envelope, and set it on the counter. Let them have their perfect wedding photos, their wine-paired dinners, their drone-shot video of the kiss beneath fairy lights. But they'd do it without the money. Or me. That evening, I took my tea out to the porch. The honeysuckle was blooming. Ruth used to say the scent smelled like Sunday dresses and choir breath. I rocked slowly, quilt across my lap, fingers resting on a patch of Ethan's old swim shirt. It felt soft now, worn in by time and truth. My wind chime tinkled gently. Somewhere down the street, a sprinkler hissed to life. For a moment, I almost believed I could let go of the sadness. Almost. Because as much as I'd taken action, and I had, make no mistake, the ache still curled beneath my ribs. I didn't want to miss Ethan's wedding. But I wouldn't beg to be part of a family that discarded me like a mismatched earring. They wanted silence. What they got was a woman with a backbone and a pen. Later that night, I pored over my recipe cards. I pulled out the one for my cornbread dressing, Ethan's favorite growing up. Every Thanksgiving, he'd ask for a second helping, then sneak a third when Lisa wasn't watching. The card was smudged and worn, edges curling like old wallpaper. I almost tossed it. But then I folded it neatly and slipped it into a small envelope. On the outside I wrote, "For when you remember who you are." No signature. I didn't mail it. Not yet. But I placed it on my desk, next to the ledger, because there might still come a day when Ethan reaches back, not for the money, but for the truth of who we were. And if he ever does, I want him to find something waiting beside silence. The next morning, the second voicemail arrived. Mark again. "Mom, we need to talk." The voice sounded different now, not angry, not curious, just unsettled. They felt it. The shift. Ruth's call came on a Wednesday. Mid-morning, just after I'd folded towels warm from the dryer and poured a second cup of tea. "Evie," she said, and I knew by her voice, that particular crack in it, like something had snapped inside her before the words even made it out. "What is it, darling?" She paused. Then, "I was at the salon today, Nancy's place. You know how Lisa goes in on Wednesdays?" I sat down slow, my knees creaking like the porch swing James never quite leveled. "Yes. Well," Ruth went on, her voice trembling, "she was in there with that friend of hers, Trina, loud one with the car that sounds like a hairdryer. They didn't see me behind the partition. I guess Nancy hadn't realized I was there either." My heart sank like a stone dropped into still water. "They were talking about the wedding," Ruth whispered, and Lisa said, "Evie," she said this with a laugh, like it was nothing. She said, "The old lady finally got the message. She won't ruin the photos now." The room felt smaller. My grip on the mug tightened. "She said that, Ruth." "She did," she whispered. And then, something worse. I didn't ask. I waited. She said, all it took was one little uninvite, and she folded like tissue paper. Honestly, I thought we'd get a fight. Guess even Evelyn knows when she's not wanted. I didn't cry. Not while Ruth spoke. Not while she apologized, over and over, for being the messenger. I just listened, calm as glass. After we hung up, I stood in my hallway for a long time, my hand on the old maple doorframe, the one Ethan used to measure his height against. Little pencil lines, faded now. There he was, age 6, barely reaching my hip. There he was again at 12, in that awkward growing year when his knees hurt and he hated his own voice. They'd built a story around me, one where I was the villain, the burden, the awkward shadow at the edge of their curated life. And Lisa? She'd handed Ethan that version of me like a wedding favor. The weight of that cruelty didn't land in one crushing blow. It seeped in slowly, like ice water soaking through your shoes until you realize your feet are frozen, your body trembling, your direction unclear. I walked into the living room. The quilt was still there, folded just right, corners square. The tag I'd stitched on the back in blue thread read, "To Ethan and Marissa." May this cover you in warmth and truth. I ran my hand over it one last time. Then I picked it up, walked to the front door, and stepped outside. The sun was high, unbothered. A neighbor's wind chime clinked softly in the breeze. I set the quilt down on the curb beside the recycling bin. Just set it there. No ceremony, no tears. It looked out of place in that spot, so full of care and meaning, discarded beside the empty boxes and broken down cartons. But that's how they'd treated it, hadn't they? Not as a gift, as clutter, as proof of my presence. Back inside, I stood at the kitchen sink, hands braced on the edge. The porcelain felt cool against my palms. The faucet dripped, slow and steady. I thought about every time I'd shown up for them. When Ethan had that fever and Lisa couldn't miss her conference call. When Mark's back went out and I mowed their whole lawn. When I spent 3 weeks making Lisa's birthday cake from scratch, only for her to call it quaint. All of it erased, like chalk washed away in a storm. But not from me. I remembered. I always would. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind churned, a river I couldn't dam. So I did what I've always done in times of heartache. I opened the ledger. Not the financial one. The other. The red leather-bound journal James gave me the year Ethan was born. Write it down, he'd said, so you don't carry it all in your chest. I flipped through the entries. July 8th, 1999. Ethan had another attack tonight. He asked me not to tell his parents how scared he was. I held his hand until he fell asleep. April 14th, 2006. Took out $6,200 from savings to cover Ethan's first college tuition payment. Mark said they'd reimburse me. They didn't. December 12th, 2011. Lisa rolled her eyes when I brought over Hanukkah gelt. We're not raising him too Jewish, she said. Ethan looked confused. I stayed silent. Page after page. Not bitter, just truth. Quietly cataloged. I added a new entry. May 10th, 2025. Left the quilt on the curb. It's the first time I've ever abandoned something I made with love, but it's also the first time I've seen what my love meant to them. I closed the journal. The ache in my chest didn't lift, but it settled, like a bruise that stops throbbing. I reached for the chamomile. My hands were steady. I didn't go to church that Sunday. First time in 42 years I've missed Mother's Day service. But I just couldn't sit through another sermon about grace and family, not when my own felt like a ghost limb. Once vital, now gone, and still aching in its absence. Instead, I stayed in my robe till nearly noon, watered the hydrangeas, fed the squirrels, rearranged the spice rack alphabetically, just to feel some small measure of control. That's when the knock came, soft but certain, 3 even taps. I knew it was Pastor Dale before I opened the door. He's been coming around since James passed. Never pushy. Just present, like a coat draped over your shoulders when you don't realize you're cold. I opened the screen. I'm not up for scripture today, Dale. He smiled, soft and crooked. Good, I didn't bring any. He held up a paper bag. But I did bring molasses cookies, from the little shop by the bank. I blinked. You remembered. Course I did. We sat in the den, the one with the faded green recliners and the fireplace that's never worked right. I poured tea. He opened the cookies. After a few bites, he cleared his throat. Ruth told me. I didn't answer. I'm not here to talk you into forgiveness, he said. Or even peace, if I'm honest. I just wanted to sit with you in the middle of it. That broke something in me. Not a dam, just a seam. I folded my napkin slow. Do you know what it's like to feel erased in a house you helped build? He nodded, his eyes steady on mine. Yes. I believed him. I told him everything, not just the wedding, but the years of slow shrinking. The way Lisa narrowed me down to a list of don'ts. Don't comment on the kid's hair. Don't show up unannounced. Don't bring food without checking dietary preferences. I told him how Mark used to call me after night shifts just to hear my voice, and how somewhere along the way he'd stopped listening at all. How I'd gone from caregiver to inconvenience. I gave everything I had to that family, I whispered. Not because I expected anything back, but I didn't think I'd have to disappear just to make them comfortable. Dale let the silence sit. Then he said, They didn't push you aside because you failed them. They pushed you aside because you reminded them. Of what? Of where they came from. Of what they owe. And they don't want to feel small. That hit somewhere behind my ribs. Because I'd felt it too. How Lisa always stiffened when I mentioned hand-me-downs. How Mark flinched when I talked about James fixing that old Dodge with duct tape and prayer. They'd outgrown their gratitude, but that didn't mean I was wrong for loving them in their beginning. Dale reached into his coat and pulled out a little wooden cross. Palm-sized, carved smooth. I give these to folks who feel like they're drifting, he said. Not as a map, just as a reminder that you still have a center. He placed it in my hand. The wood was warm from his pocket. I think you've been strong a long time, Evelyn, he said, but I think now you're clear. I looked down at the cross. It smelled faintly of cedar and lemon oil. Clarity, I murmured. That's a dangerous thing for a woman my age, isn't it? He smiled. Only if the people around you prefer confusion. After he left, I stood in my kitchen for a long while. The tea had gone cold. The cookies sat half-eaten on the floral china James's mother left me. I touched the small wooden cross again. My eyes scanned the fridge. The magnets from church retreats, the emergency numbers, the faded photo of Ethan on his first day of kindergarten. So much of my life was lived in service to them. To their needs, their dreams, their timelines. I'd postponed trips, skipped dates, canceled surgeries. I'd saved my best stories for when Ethan would visit, always hoping to feel seen again. And still, they said I was too much. Later that evening, I opened my cedar chest. Inside were the letters James had written me while we were courting, tied with ribbon, neatly stacked, yellowing at the edges. The first one began with, "Evie, you are not a burden. You are the fire in the hearth." I laid my palm across the page, my wedding ring still warm from the day's light. Not a burden, not a shadow, not a placeholder. The fire in the hearth. That night, I slept soundly. First time in weeks. I didn't dream of the wedding. I dreamt of standing barefoot in the yard, Ruth laughing beside me, a breeze tugging at the laundry line, while the wind chimes sang their quiet songs. 2 days later, I put on my walking shoes, the navy pair with the padded arch, and headed out just after breakfast. The birds were loud. The air smelled like wet bark and warm grass. Carla's porch had a little pot of marigolds blooming, stubborn and bright, like Ruth's lipstick on Sundays. She opened the door before I knocked. "You ready?" I nodded. We didn't waste time on small talk. She knew. I think she'd been waiting for me to get here in my own time, not before. That's the thing about a good lawyer and a good friend. They know when to hold your hand, and when to hand you the pen. We sat at her desk, the same one where I'd updated the trust. But this felt bigger. Not because of money, but because of meaning. "Take your time," Carla said. "This is legacy level." I laughed, soft and low. "My legacy used to be sticky notes in Ethan's lunchbox," she smiled. "Still counts." I opened the folder. The will. The original version still had Mark and Lisa listed as primary heirs. First, the house, then the remainder of my savings, then whatever bonds and life insurance trickled down. And here's the part no one tells you when you're old, darling. The people who count your love by the square footage of your living room are always doing the math. But I'd done the math too. And it added up to one thing. Enough. Enough silence. Enough humiliation. Enough waiting to be invited into the life I helped build. Carla passed me the draft. At the top, Evelyn May Whitmore. Last will and testament, revised. I read each line carefully. Then I made the changes. Strike Mark and Lisa. Entirely. No partial shares. No loopholes. Add charitable distributions. 50% to the Women's Domestic Resource Shelter. 25% to the local food bank. 25% to a scholarship fund for nursing students. And the house? That stayed close to home. I want the house to go to the community youth program, I said. The one that helps kids transition out of foster care. Let them plant roots somewhere with good bones. Carla blinked, then nodded. That's beautiful, Evelyn. It's mine to give, I said, signing my name with the steadiness of a woman who no longer trembles. By the time I left her office, the sun was high and hot. The world felt lighter, not in the way of joy, but in the way of burdens set down at last. I went home, brewed a pot of rosehip tea, and sat at the kitchen table. No answering machine blinking, no invitations rescinded, just quiet, the good kind. That night, I opened the ledger again, the red one. May 12th, 2025, rewrote my will, removed the people who removed me. I closed the book, set it beside the window, and let the evening air cool the heat rising in my chest. There's a difference between anger and clarity. Anger burns out. Clarity builds a road. The next morning, I visited Ruth. She was pruning her roses, straw hat tipped back, clippers in hand. "You look like you just came from a courtroom drama," she said, eyeing my ironed blouse. I smiled. Close. We sat on her porch and drank lemonade from jelly jars, the way we've done since our kids were toddlers and our hair hadn't turned white. I told her everything. Every clause, every decision, every quiet turn of the key. She didn't interrupt once, just nodded, her mouth tightening into a line I knew meant pride and pain were holding hands. When I finished, she exhaled hard. "Well," she said, "I'd say justice has better manners in your hands." I laughed, loud and real. First time in a while. "You think I'm being cruel?" I asked. She looked at me, sharp and kind. "I think you finally stopped giving to people who only came to take." That night, I watched the news with the sound low and the window open. I'd always loved the smell of cut grass and distant barbecue smoke. I sat with my knitting in my lap. Not a baby blanket this time, not a scarf for Christmas. Just a pattern I liked. Just for me. The phone rang once. Twice. I let it go to voicemail. Then I turned it off completely. Because peace, sweetheart, real peace, doesn't make itself known by who calls. It shows up in who you no longer have to answer to. The knock came on a Saturday. No call first, no text, just hard knuckles on the screen door like I was a stranger in my own life. I didn't rush, took my time tying the belt on my robe, setting my teacup down gently, checking the porch through the side window. I knew that silhouette. Mark. He looked too clean, hair too neat, shirt too tucked, the look of a man who wanted something but couldn't admit it out loud. I opened the door halfway. "Hi, Mom." It had been months since he'd looked me in the eye. Now he couldn't stop. "Didn't expect to see you," I said. "I was just driving by." I raised an eyebrow. "With Lisa's Lexus?" He gave a sheepish laugh. "Yeah, we were out. Thought we'd check in." "Where is she?" He hesitated. "She thought it'd be better if I came in alone." I nodded slowly. Damage control." His face tightened. "Can I come in?" I let the door swing open without answering, walked back to the kitchen and poured another cup of tea. I didn't ask if he wanted any. He followed like he used to as a boy, trailing behind me with questions about what was for dinner. Only now he was 52, and I wasn't making casseroles for boys who couldn't say thank you. He sat across from me at the table, fingers tapping the edge of the placemat I'd quilted in 1984. I let the silence stretch. If he was going to talk, he'd have to start. "I heard you made some changes," he said finally. I stirred my tea. "I did." "Mom, why? We could have talked about this." I looked up. Steady. Calm. "No, sweetheart. You talked. For years." I listened. This time, I spoke. He blinked, and for a second I saw the boy he used to be, the one who thought I could fix anything. Then the mask returned. "You didn't have to cut us out. Didn't I?" He bristled. "We're family." I set my cup down. "Family is supposed to see each other. You didn't see me. You saw a future estate. A nuisance. An embarrassment. That's not fair." "No," I said, voice quiet but sure. "It's accurate." He looked down, rubbed the back of his neck. "Lisa didn't mean what she said at the salon. Ruth was eavesdropping." I tilted my head. "And what about you, Mark? Did you mean it? When you told me not to come?" He flinched. I thought it would be easier for everyone. I raised you to do what's right, not what's easy." He didn't answer, just stared at the table like it might offer him a way out. There was another knock. This time gentler. I opened the door to find Ethan. My grandson. My boy. He looked different, not older. Clearer. Like someone who had woken up too late and was still rubbing the sleep from his eyes. "Gran," he said, his voice soft, his eyes searching mine. "Come in." He walked slowly, like he was stepping back into something sacred. When he saw his father at the table, he paused. "Mom sent me," he said, voice careful. "She thought I might have better luck." Mark's face soured. "We don't need to gang up." Ethan shook his head. "I'm not here for that." He turned to me. "I'm here to ask, honestly, is it true? You changed everything?" I nodded. "It's true." "Why?" he whispered. I gestured for him to sit. He did. Shoulders slumped, fingers tapping the rim of the mug I'd poured for him before he even walked in. "You were my world, Ethan," I said gently. "When your parents were building their image, I was building your childhood." He looked up sharply. "I didn't know. I didn't tell you. I didn't think I had to." His eyes filled, not with rage, with sorrow. "Gran, I didn't mean for this to happen." "I know," Mark interrupted, voice sharp. "Ethan, don't start apologizing." Ethan raised a hand, silencing his father. He looked at me again. "What now?" I leaned back in my chair, crossed my arms. "I've made my decisions. Not out of anger, out of survival, out of love for myself." He swallowed hard. "Can we fix it?" I took a long sip of tea. "You meant what you said," I said, looking from Ethan to Mark. "All of you. You meant to shut me out. I'm not gonna crawl back in. If we're going to start again, it won't be from guilt, it'll be from truth." They were both quiet. Mark's jaw twitched. Ethan nodded. "I understand," he said. I believed him. Mark stood suddenly. "This is ridiculous. You're making a spectacle of this." "No," I said, standing too. "You did that when you made your mother feel disposable." He opened his mouth, then closed it. I walked him to the door. "Tell Lisa," I said, "that the trust won't open with an apology card. It's locked, just like the door behind you." He stepped out into the bright afternoon, blinking like he couldn't quite believe the sun was still shining. I turned back to Ethan. He was still sitting at the table, tea untouched. "You can stay for lunch if you like," I said. His voice broke. "Please." Ethan stayed for lunch. We didn't say much. He helped slice tomatoes. I buttered bread. The quiet between us wasn't heavy, just honest, like old friends who don't need to fill every space with noise. I made grilled cheese the way he liked as a child. Extra cheddar, crusts cut off, with a little bowl of tomato soup for dipping. "I remember this," he said, dunking the corner of his sandwich. I smiled. "You used to call it Grandma Pizza." He gave a soft chuckle, but his eyes didn't lift from the plate. There was a question on his face. It had been there since he sat down. Can I see the photo albums?" he asked finally. "Of course, sweetheart. Bottom drawer of the hutch." He went to get them, careful like the albums were sacred texts, which, in a way, they were. My scriptures of family, the pages that remembered what others forgot. He sat cross-legged on the rug, flipping gently through the first volume. There he was on the cover, Ethan, age 4, holding a daffodil with dirt still clinging to the stem. "I don't remember this picture," he murmured. "You had strep that week. You'd been crying, but I got you outside in the sun. Said flowers were the fastest medicine." His fingers paused. "You were always there." "Yes." He turned the page. Birthday parties, Halloween costumes, science fair projects. At first, he smiled. But as he kept turning, the smile faded. "Where are Mom and Dad in these?" I sipped my tea. "Busy, usually. Lisa was building her business. Mark traveled a lot. You stayed here most weeks, sometimes whole summers." He nodded slowly, eyes still scanning. I thought I remembered, but I guess I didn't. He turned to the next album, the years of high school and first heartbreaks. There was a card tucked between 2 pages. It slid out and landed in his lap. He picked it up. It was one he'd made for me, years ago. Crayon handwriting on thick paper. "Thank you for always staying up when I'm sick. I love you more than all the stars. Ethan, age 9. His fingers trembled. "I didn't know I gave you this." "You did. You handed it to me on the couch while you were still wheezing. Said you wrote it during lunch at school." He rubbed the card like it might vanish. Dad said you were never really involved, that you liked to make things dramatic. I didn't respond. Sometimes the best way to break a lie is to let the truth sit beside it in silence. He kept going, now faster, like looking for confirmation. More drawings, postcards, school notes. At the back of the third album, he paused. He held up a photo. It was from his high school graduation. He was standing with his diploma, arms wrapped around me. I was crying, mascara smudged, my smile cracked but proud. Lisa wasn't in the shot. Mark was off to the side, phone in hand. "I remember this day," he said. "You told me how proud James would have been. I meant it. I didn't know you helped pay for it. I didn't tell you. You had enough to carry." He looked up, tears brimming now. "You signed my loans." "Yes. Your father said it wasn't the right time financially." I disagreed. He took a breath, steadying himself. "Why didn't you ever say something?" "I was taught that love isn't announced. It's lived." That's when I saw it. The crack, the hairline fracture, down the glossy image they'd painted of me. The one Lisa had shaped, and Mark had protected. That fracture had started with a trust clause, but now it widened, split by proof, by paper and pictures and memories they'd told him to forget. He stood up suddenly and walked to the secretary desk. I didn't stop him. He opened the top drawer and pulled out the red leather ledger. I watched as he turned pages, slower this time, reading the small notations. Ethan dental copay, Ethan swim camp fee, Ethan's suit for prom. He stopped on the most recent entry, May 10th, 2025, left the quilt on the curb. "It's the first time I've ever abandoned something I made with love, but it's also the first time I've seen what my love meant to them." He sat back down on the floor, holding the book like a confession. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I don't know how I let them talk me out of who you are." I set my cup down. My hands were shaking now, but not from grief, from the slow, rising tremor of relief. "You were a boy," I said gently. And they were louder. He looked up. "I want to be louder now." Before he left, he hugged me, long and tight, like he used to when he didn't know what else to say. "You'll come back?" I asked softly. "If you'll let me." "Always." He stepped off the porch into the late afternoon sun, and for the first time in a long while, I felt the front door close with peace instead of loneliness. 2 days later, Ethan came back. He brought flowers. Dahlias, the deep plum kind I used to grow in the side yard before my knees said no more crouching. He remembered. That was the first apology. We didn't talk much at first. Just tea, again, and a slice of banana bread I'd made with the last of the overripe ones. He sat at the table like he belonged there, and for a moment, it felt like time had paused, like we were back in the quiet between swim meets and spelling tests. Then he looked up. "Would you show me everything?" I didn't ask what he meant. I just got up, went to the hallway, and pulled down the box. It was heavier than I remembered. Or maybe I was just older now. My hands used to carry his feverish body across this house without a second thought. I set the box on the table and opened it. Inside, hospital bills from when Mark and Lisa didn't have insurance, credit statements with charges I paid quietly, co-signed loan documents for Ethan's first 2 years of college, receipts from the apartment furniture Lisa borrowed during her big promotion, a handwritten list of monthly grocery runs I'd done for them during the recession, post-it notes with scribbles like, "Pick up Ethan's inhaler, drop off care package to campus, mail check for Tyler's braces." I slid each paper out slowly, laid them side by side on the table like puzzle pieces. "This is all you?" he asked. I nodded. "They said," his voice caught, "they always said you offered, that you insisted." "I did," I said, "because I loved you, because I wanted to help. But love offered doesn't mean love assumed. And what they took wasn't help. It was entitlement." He picked up one of the pharmacy receipts. His name. His inhaler. My card. "I never saw any of this," he whispered. "No. Because it wasn't for show." He leaned back in his chair like the weight of it all finally hit. "How much did you give us over the years?" I smiled, soft. "Enough that I stopped counting." He looked at me then. Really looked. Eyes wide, lips parted. "Gran, why didn't you tell me?" I laid a hand over his. My thumb rubbed the same place I used to when he was scared as a boy. "Because I believed love would speak for itself." He closed his eyes. just for a moment. When he opened them again, they were wet. I feel like I've been lied to. I didn't say anything. Sometimes the hardest part isn't hearing the truth. It's realizing how long you accepted the lie. He reached into the box again, pulled out a birthday card I'd written him when he turned 12. Dear Ethan, 12 years ago, you made me a grandmother. I didn't know my heart could stretch that wide. You're my sunshine on the darkest days. Love always, Gran. He wiped his eyes. They told me you didn't want to come to the wedding, that you were tired of being involved. I let out a slow breath. Darling, I bought a dress 3 months ago. I wrapped a quilt in silver ribbon. I RSVP'd no after I was told to stay away. He shook his head like he could unhear the memory. I believed them. Yes, I said. You did. There was no anger in my voice, just resignation, and maybe, a little bit of hope tucked into the corner of it. He stayed through dinner. We didn't rehash, we didn't rebleed. We just made grilled chicken and rice, and I showed him how to snip basil from the little pot I keep on the windowsill. He asked if he could come again next week. I told him the door would be open, if it stayed kind. Before he left, he turned to me at the door. I don't know what to do now, he said. They're going to ask me to defend them. I tilted my head. Are you ready to stop pretending that silence is the same thing as loyalty? He stood still for a long time. Then he nodded. I think I am. Later that night, I sat on the couch, the photo albums back in their place, the ledger back in the drawer, the box sealed once again. I sipped chamomile tea with a dash of honey and waited. Sure enough, the phone rang. Mark. I let it go to voicemail. Then came Lisa's voice. Less syrupy this time. Ethan's being difficult. Did something happen? We need to talk. I smiled. The cracks were showing. Not in me, in them. The call came just before noon. I was folding laundry, towels mostly, still warm from the dryer. Funny how that simple comfort can feel like armor when you're bracing for battle. The phone rang once, twice, then a third time before I picked it up. Not because I was uncertain, but because I wanted him to wait. Mom, Mark said, breath sharp. We need to talk. I said nothing. Just waited. I just got off the phone with Ethan. Still I waited. He told me about the papers, the trust, everything. I said. Then we have nothing left to clarify. He barked a laugh, humorless and brittle. What the hell is happening? Clarity, I said calmly. That's what's happening. You're blowing up this family over one wedding. There it was. One wedding. One humiliation, one public erasure, one betrayal too far. I inhaled through my nose, slow and steady. The scent of lavender and warm fabric clung to the laundry basket at my hip. Mark, I said, voice even. I've been blown off, not blown up. You're being irrational, he snapped. Vindictive. No, I said, letting each word fall like stones. I'm done being convenient. He paused. I could hear the heat in his silence, like a dog pulling on a leash, not sure how far it could go before snapping it. This isn't about Lisa, he said. It's not even about Ethan. It's about you not knowing your place anymore. That did it. That right there. I set the basket down on the counter, smoothed a folded dish towel, let the silence hang long enough that he might realize what he'd just said. Then I said the one line I'd carried in my chest since that first phone call. I'm not ruining it, Mark. I just stopped pretending I was part of it. There was a sound then. Not words. Just his breath hitching, like he'd tripped in the dark. You don't mean that. I do, he tried again. We can fix this. Just undo the changes. Come to the wedding. Lisa will apologize. I cut him off. Don't offer me scraps, Mark. I baked your bread for 30 years. I hung up. Not with fury. With finality. I set the phone down gently beside the vase of wildflowers Ethan brought last week. Some of them had wilted. Some were still stubbornly blooming. I walked to the living room and opened the red ledger. May 18th, 2025. Mark said, I don't know my place. I told him I do. It's no longer beneath their feet. I closed the book. No tears. Only a quiet electric stillness, like the air before a storm. Ruth stopped by that afternoon with lemon bars and fire in her eyes. He called me, she said, marching into the kitchen like a woman with purpose. Wanted me to talk some sense into you. I handed her a napkin. Did you? She gave me a look. Darling, I told him sense finally found you. We sat at the kitchen table, each of us with a bar, powdered sugar dusting our fingers. I'm proud of you, she said. I'm proud of me too. We toasted with tea like it was champagne. That night, I stood on my porch as the sun slid down behind the trees. I watched the neighbor kids chase fireflies in the yard, giggling and shrieking. Life was still happening out there. And for the first time in a long while, I wasn't waiting for permission to step back into it. Inside, the answering machine blinked again. Lisa this time, the voice tight, controlled. Mark's very upset. Ethan's been different lately. Whatever you said to him, it's affecting the whole family. I didn't press play on the rest, because what they called damage, I called truth finally standing tall. They were scrambling. And I was standing still. The meeting was set for Wednesday. Carla arranged it at her office. Neutral ground. She said it would be just a formality, but we both knew better. Mark insisted on being there. Lisa too. Ethan asked if I wanted him to come. I want you to come, I said. But not to speak, just to witness. He nodded. Then I will. I wore my navy skirt and the white blouse with the lace collar. James always said I looked like someone you should listen to when I wore it. I pinned my silver locket at the throat. Inside, a photo of Ethan at 6 and one of James the day we bought the house. The locket clicked shut like punctuation. Final. Certain. Carla greeted me with that calm strength of hers. She wore flats this time. No nonsense shoes. I appreciated that. They're already here, she said quietly, nodding toward the back conference room. I stepped in. Lisa was seated, all in beige silk and crossed legs. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Mark stood when I entered, like manners might buy him back his seat at the table. Ethan followed behind me and sat off to the side, near the window. He didn't make eye contact with his parents. Carla began without preamble. That's why I like her. This is a review of the revised legal documents pertaining to the Whitmore estate, as directed by Evelyn Whitmore, sole executor and trust manager. She handed out copies. Thick stacks. Neat. Precise. Lisa flipped hers open, eyes scanning like a hawk in a storm. Mark barely glanced. So this is really happening, he muttered. No, I said softly. This already happened. What you're holding is the evidence. Lisa's mouth tightened. Mark leaned forward. You're leaving everything to charities? To strangers? I tilted my head. To children aging out of foster care. To battered women rebuilding their lives. To hungry families. If that's what you call strangers, Mark, perhaps it's time to look in a mirror. Lisa jumped in. We never meant to exclude you. That was a misunderstanding. Carla cleared her throat. Mrs. Whitmore's presence was specifically requested in the trust clause. Her absence would void distribution. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a legal failure to meet terms. Lisa's charm flickered. We thought she'd change her mind. It was supposed to be temporary. I was supposed to beg, I said. Mark's fists clenched. You're punishing us. No, I said. I'm releasing myself from people who never saw me as more than an inheritance on legs. Ethan shifted then. Not loudly. Just enough. Lisa turned toward him. Ethan, say something. Tell her we can fix this. He looked at me. Gran, may I? I gave a small nod. He turned back to them. She doesn't need to be fixed. You do. Mark scowled. Don't talk to us like that. I will if it means you finally hear her. Lisa's voice rose. We included her for years. Dinners, birthdays, holidays. Ethan interrupted. You invited her like a prop. A placeholder. You edited her out of photos. Lisa turned pale. He looked at me again. Gran, I see it now. All of it. I closed my eyes for a second. That was all I'd ever wanted. Not revenge, not money, just recognition. Carla continued. Unless there are legal objections, these documents will be filed with the county clerk tomorrow. Changes to the will and trust will be permanent and binding. Mark leaned back in his chair, defeated. Lisa crossed her arms. You're doing this out of spite. I stood then. Slowly. Placed my hand over the ledger Carla had brought along at my request. No, Lisa, I said. I'm doing this because love and loyalty should never be bought or betrayed. They should be earned. And honored. I paused, which is why you're no longer included. Silence. Real silence. The kind that follows the last note of a song. Final. Whole. I turned to Ethan. "You can ride back with me if you like." He nodded, eyes full, jaw tight. As we left the room, I heard Mark say softly, "She really means it." And Carla replied, "She always did. You just weren't listening." Back home, I hung my blouse in the hallway and stepped out onto the porch. The air smelled like fresh rain and distant magnolia. Ethan followed, 2 cups of tea in hand. He sat beside me. Neither of us spoke for a while. Finally, he said, "Do you think they'll ever get it?" I sipped my tea. "Maybe, but I'm not waiting." He looked at me. "I love you, Gran." I smiled. "I know, I love you too." The wedding day arrived with perfect weather. Clear skies, gold-filtered sunlight. The kind of early summer afternoon people dream about, for photos and first dances, under rented lanterns. I wasn't invited. But I knew the time, knew the venue. Knew Lisa had probably arranged for calla lilies and champagne flutes with etched initials. I didn't put on the dress I'd bought. Didn't unwrap the shoes. Didn't smooth the lavender blouse I'd pressed weeks ago when I still believed in grace from that corner of my family. Instead, I sat on the porch with a book and the locket James gave me on our 25th anniversary. The one with Ethan's photo curled close to his. They were both smiling. They both still loved me, in their way. I just couldn't afford to live inside someone else's version of what that meant anymore. At 9:14 that morning, my phone rang. It was Ethan. His voice cracked on the second word. "Gran." I put my book down. "Take your time, sweetheart. I got the notice. The trust. It's still locked." "Yes." He sniffed. "It says it'll remain frozen unless you personally request amendment after the ceremony." "That's correct." Silence. Then, soft as breath. Is there any way?" I didn't answer right away. I let the weight of it sit. Not to punish. To teach. "You told the truth," I said gently. "But healing doesn't come that fast." "I know. It's not just about inviting me, Ethan. It's about choosing me. When no one else does. When it's inconvenient. When it costs you something." He choked back a sob. "I want to. I really do. I didn't know." "You do now." He sniffled. "So what happens next?" "You get married," I said. "You make your promises. And you live them." "And you?" he asked, his voice shaking. "I watch the sunset. I plant my dahlias. I answer the phone when people call with truth in their voices." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I'm sorry. I know. I love you. I never doubted that. But you're still not coming." I looked out at the trees, their leaves shivering in the breeze like they were applauding something only I could hear. "No, sweetheart, not today." He didn't argue, didn't beg. That too was growth. The wedding went on. I didn't follow the photos online, didn't ask for updates. I wasn't interested in a narrative I hadn't been invited to live. But I did hear that Lisa's mother made a toast that was more about crystal patterns than connection. That the cake was lovely, but the bride looked tense. That Mark was quiet all evening, like someone realizing his hands had finally come back empty. That night, I pulled the quilt from the cedar chest. Yes, the quilt. After I'd set it at the curb weeks ago, Ruth snuck over and rescued it before the garbage truck arrived. "I knew you weren't done with it," she'd said, folding it and placing it on my cedar chest like a peace offering. I held it now, smoothed the stitches. I didn't feel rage anymore. Just a quiet knowing. They lost something. Not me, the chance to know me. The next morning, I wrote a letter. Not to Ethan. To the scholarship board for the local community college. Please let me fund a nursing scholarship in memory of my husband James Whitmore, RN, and in honor of the countless quiet women who loved families that outgrew them. I sealed it, stamped it, and placed it by the door. Then I took the locket from my neck, opened it, removed the picture of Ethan. I didn't throw it away. I tucked it into the red ledger. May 22nd, 2025. He said he's sorry. I believe him. But I won't offer forgiveness like a prize at a county fair. Love deserves more weight than that. The sun set without ceremony. Just a hush of pink, then indigo. I didn't cry. I just turned the porch light on, poured myself a cup of cinnamon tea, and sat with my piece. It wasn't loud, it didn't knock, but it stayed.